We're following a developing story involving yet another one of President Trump's U.S. attorneys. A federal appeals court ruled that Alina Habba, the president's former personal attorney, is unlawfully serving as the U.S. attorney in New Jersey. It's the same reason a federal judge in Virginia dismissed the Justice Department's cases against James Comey and Letitia James. CNN's Caitlin Polantz is following the story. Seeing a pattern here, Caitlin.
There is a bit of a pattern. The big picture is that the appeals court today, now this is appeals court that only applies to Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, of course. What they are saying is that the Justice Department, the Trump administration, they can't do a runaround of Congress if there's somebody that is nominated to one of these U.S. attorney positions and then doesn't get confirmed by the Senate. That's what happened with Habba. Then the Trump administration tried to...
Okay, so here's something that should scare every single American, regardless of which party you support. A federal appeals court just told President Trump that he can't do whatever he wants, that he can't just install his personal lawyer as a top prosecutor without going through the proper channels. And this is huge because it's the first time an appeals court has drawn a line in the sand and said no. You cannot bypass the rules just because you're the president. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on December 1st, 2025 that Alina Habba, Trump's former personal attorney and one of his most loyal defenders, is disqualified from serving as New Jersey's top federal prosecutor. Gone. Done. Out. And the reason is simple. She was never properly confirmed by the Senate the way the law requires. This is a massive legal defeat for the administration. Now, if you don't know who Alina Habba is, let me catch you up real quick because this context matters. She's been one of Trump's most visible lawyers for years now. She joined his legal team back in 2021 and has been by his side through lawsuit after lawsuit, defending him at every turn. She's been on television defending him constantly. She's been in courtrooms arguing for him on case after case. And then Trump becomes president again, and suddenly she's the top federal prosecutor in New Jersey. Just like that. No Senate confirmation hearing. No vetting process whatsoever. Just boom. You're in charge now, go do whatever you want. And the courts just said that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works in our system of government. You can't just hand out powerful government positions to your friends like you're giving out candy on Halloween and expect nobody to notice or care about it. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Stick her in through sort of the back door, the career door of that U.S. Attorney's Office to elevate her into the role. They said, that's not right. With Lindsay Halligan and some others, there's different circumstances, but the message is clear. You can't just give someone the authority to be the U.S. attorney because you want them to be in that job. You actually have to go through the process of having congressional approval for people like this.
So, Alina Habba, people who were tuned in during the president's trials when he was facing, particularly in New York, when he was facing personal troubles, they were very familiar with her because she came out and she talked to the cameras a lot.
Yeah.
What do we think is going to happen next there?
Well, now we have to wait and see exactly what the Justice Department does. Do they appeal again? They have that possibility to go either to the full Third Circuit Court of Appeals. This was 3 judges in unanimity here.
The ruling specifically says that Habba's appointment violated something called the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. And yeah, I know that sounds boring and technical, but stay with me here because this matters a lot. The Federal Vacancies Reform Act is basically a law that says when there's an empty government position, there are specific rules about who can fill it temporarily and for how long. You can't just ignore those rules because you feel like it. You can't just say, well, I'm the president, so I can do what I want. The law exists for a reason, and that reason is to prevent exactly what Trump has been trying to do, which is stack the Department of Justice with loyalists who will do whatever he asks without any oversight or accountability from Congress or anyone else. The attorneys who challenged Haba's appointment are calling this a landmark moment in the fight for accountability. They're saying this is the first appeals court ruling that confirms Trump cannot bypass proper procedures. And they're promising more fights ahead, because Haba isn't the only one in this situation. Similar disqualifications have already hit other Trump-appointed prosecutors, like Lindsay Halligan in Virginia. This is a pattern. This is a strategy that has been playing out across the country, and the courts are starting to push back against it. But here's the thing that really gets me about all of this. This ruling impacts dozens of ongoing cases in New Jersey, dozens of them. Real criminal cases that now have to figure out what happens next because the person who was supposed to be prosecuting them just got kicked out. Can you imagine being a defendant in one of those cases right now? Can you imagine being a victim waiting for justice? This isn't just political theater. This has real consequences for real people. And look, I know some of you are going to say this is just Democrats trying to stop Trump from doing his job. But here's the reality. The Senate confirmation process exists for Republicans and Democrats alike. Every president has to deal with it regardless of party. Obama had to get his appointees confirmed. Bush had to get his appointees confirmed. This isn't some new rule that was invented to target Trump specifically. This is how the system has worked for decades. The question is whether Trump gets to ignore that system just because he doesn't like it. And at least for now, the courts are saying, no, you cannot do that. This story connects to so much of what we've been covering lately. The chaos in the Department of Justice, the Epstein files that just dropped, the gerrymandering battles heading into the midterms. All of it points to the same thing. A fight over who controls the levers of power and whether anyone is going to hold this administration accountable. Democrats are already using this ruling to hammer their message about transparency and the rule of law. They're saying this proves Trump thinks he's above the rules, and Republicans are stuck trying to defend appointments that courts keep throwing out. This is exposing cracks in Trump's control over the DOJ, and it's happening at the worst possible time for his agenda. Stick with me, because we're going to break down exactly what happened and why it matters and what comes next. All right, so let's really get into what's happening here, because there's a lot more to this story than just one person losing their job. This is about how Trump has been trying to reshape the entire Department of Justice by installing loyalists in key positions without going through the normal confirmation process that every other president has had to follow. And until now, it's been working. He's been getting away with it, putting his people in place, having them make decisions about which cases to pursue and which ones to drop. And nobody has been able to stop him because by the time the legal challenges work their way through the courts, the damage is already done. But this ruling changes things. This ruling says, wait a minute, you actually can't do that. Let me explain how we got here because the timeline matters and most people don't understand how this all unfolded. Back in the early months of Trump's second term, there were a bunch of vacant positions in the Department of Justice, U.S. attorney jobs in different states that needed to be filled. Now, normally what happens is the president nominates someone and then the Senate holds hearings and votes on whether to confirm them. It's a process that takes time, but it exists for good reason. It gives Congress oversight over who gets these powerful positions. It prevents the president from just stacking the DOJ with yes men who will do whatever he wants without question. But Trump didn't want to wait for that process. He didn't want to deal with Senate hearings where his nominees might face tough questions about their qualifications and independence. So instead, he used something called interim appointments to put his people in place right away. Now, interim appointments are supposed to be temporary. They're supposed to be a way to keep the government running while you wait for the real nominee to get confirmed through the proper process. But Trump has been using them as a workaround to avoid accountability altogether. He puts his loyalists in these interim positions and then just never bothers with the confirmation process. Or he drags it out so long that by the time anyone challenges it, the person has already been in the job for months making important decisions. That's exactly what happened with Alina Habba. She was put into the New Jersey U.S. Attorney position as an interim appointment, and then she just stayed there, making decisions about federal cases, representing the government in court, acting like she had the full authority of a confirmed U.S. attorney when she never actually went through the process that would give her that authority legitimately. The Federal Vacancies Reform Act, which I mentioned earlier, has specific rules about this. It says who can serve in an interim role and for how long. And according to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, Habba's appointment violated those rules. The court looked at the law and said, nope, this doesn't work. You can't just put anyone you want in these positions. There are procedures that have to be followed, and when you ignore those procedures, the appointment is invalid, which means everything Haba did while she was in that role is now in question. Every decision she made, every case she prosecuted, all of it could potentially be challenged because she never had the legal authority to be there in the first place. This is a huge mess, and it's entirely self-inflicted by an administration that thought it could ignore the rules. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The attorneys who brought this challenge are saying this is just the beginning. They're calling it the first appeals court ruling that Trump cannot bypass procedures, the first one, which means they expect more rulings like this to come. They expect more of Trump's interim appointments to be challenged and thrown out. And they're right to expect that because Haba isn't the only one in this situation. Lindsey Halligan in Virginia is facing the same kind of challenge. There are probably others we haven't even heard about yet. Trump has been doing this across the country, and now the legal challenges are starting to catch up with him. And let's talk about what this means for actual cases, because this isn't just an abstract legal debate that only lawyers care about. In New Jersey alone, there are dozens of ongoing criminal cases that Haba was involved in. Drug cases, fraud cases, public corruption cases. All of them now have a cloud hanging over them because the prosecutor who was handling them just got disqualified. Defense attorneys are already licking their chops. They're going to argue that any case Haba touched should be thrown out or retried because she didn't have the authority to prosecute in the first place. Some of those arguments might work, some of them might not, but either way it's going to create chaos in the New Jersey federal court system for months or even years to come. This also connects to the broader pattern we've been seeing with Trump and the DOJ. Remember, this is the same administration that just had the Georgia election interference case dropped. The same administration that's dealing with the fallout from the Epstein email release. The same administration that's fighting gerrymandering battles in the courts while trying to maintain Republican control of the House. Everything is connected, and everything points to the same question. Is anyone going to hold this president accountable, or is he going to get away with whatever he wants? The Haba ruling suggests that at least some courts are willing to push back. But it's important to understand the limits of what this ruling actually does. It doesn't stop Trump from nominating Haba through the proper channels. He could theoretically send her name to the Senate tomorrow and try to get her confirmed the legitimate way. Whether she would actually get confirmed is another question. There might be enough opposition to block her, but the option is there. What the ruling does is say that you can't skip the process. You can't just put your friends in powerful positions and pretend like the rules don't apply to you. That's a meaningful check on executive power, even if it's not a complete solution to the problem. Democrats are already using this ruling to make a broader argument about Trump and the rule of law. They're saying this proves what they've been warning about all along, that Trump sees himself as above the law and that he doesn't respect democratic institutions and that he's trying to turn the DOJ into his personal legal team. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that interpretation when you look at the pattern of behavior. Haba isn't some random prosecutor who happens to know Trump. She was his personal lawyer. She defended him in court for years. She appeared on television arguing his cases week after week. And then suddenly she's the top federal prosecutor in New Jersey? Come on. Everyone knows what that looks like. Everyone knows what that means. Republicans are in a tough spot trying to defend this. Some of them are saying the court got it wrong and the appointment was valid. Others are quietly hoping the story goes away before the midterms. And a few are probably wondering if backing Trump on everything is really worth the political cost when courts keep slapping down his decisions. This is the kind of ruling that makes moderate Republicans nervous. It makes them look like they're defending someone who doesn't follow the rules. And heading into an election cycle where they're already vulnerable, that's not a great look for the party. Okay, so let's break this down into the key points you need to understand, because this story is going to keep developing and you need to know what to watch for. Point number 1. This ruling is a direct rebuke of Trump's strategy for controlling the Department of Justice. He's been trying to install loyalists in key positions without going through Senate confirmation. He's been using interim appointments as a loophole to get around the normal process. And the Third Circuit Court of Appeals just said that doesn't fly. You cannot violate the Federal Vacancies Reform Act just because you're the president. There are rules, there are procedures, and you have to follow them just like everyone else. This is significant because it's the first appeals court ruling to directly address this issue. Lower courts have raised concerns before, but an appeals court ruling carries more weight and sets a precedent for future challenges. Point number 2, this ruling could impact dozens of cases in New Jersey and potentially across the country. Alina Habba was actively involved in prosecuting federal cases while she was in this position. Drug trafficking cases, white-collar crime cases, public corruption cases. All of those cases now have a question mark hanging over them. Defense attorneys are going to argue that Habba's involvement taints the entire prosecution. Some judges might agree and throw cases out. Others might order new trials. At minimum, it's going to cause delays and chaos in the court system as everyone figures out what to do next. And this isn't just happening in New Jersey. Similar challenges are underway in Virginia and other states where Trump made similar appointments. The ripple effects could be enormous, and we're only beginning to see them play out. Point number 3, Alina Habba's disqualification exposes a pattern of loyalty over qualifications in Trump's DOJ appointments. This isn't about whether Habba is a good lawyer or not. It's about why she was chosen and how she got the job. She was Trump's personal attorney. She defended him in court for years. She was on television every week making his case to the public. And then suddenly, she's one of the most powerful prosecutors in the country without ever going through a Senate confirmation hearing. That's not how the system is supposed to work. Federal prosecutors are supposed to be independent. They're supposed to follow the law and the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to the president's allies. But how can anyone believe Habba would be independent when her entire career has been built on defending Trump personally? It's a fundamental conflict of interest, and the courts finally called it out. Point number 4, this ruling fits into a larger pattern of legal setbacks for Trump's DOJ strategy. The Georgia election case dismissal, the Epstein email controversy, the gerrymandering fights, the interim appointment challenges. All of these stories are connected because they all involve the same question. Who controls the Department of Justice, and what are they using that control for? Trump has been trying to reshape the DOJ to serve his interests. He's been installing loyalists. He's been dropping cases against allies. He's been redirecting investigations toward enemies. And while he's had some successes, he's also facing real pushback from the courts and from civil society groups that are challenging these moves. The Habba ruling is one more example of the courts saying, actually, no, there are limits to what you can do. So, what happens next? That's what everyone wants to know. In the short term, there's going to be chaos in New Jersey as the U.S. Attorney's Office figures out who's actually in charge and what happens to all the cases Habba was handling. There might be appeals. The administration could try to take this to the Supreme Court, though it's not clear they'd succeed. In the medium term, we're going to see more challenges to other interim appointments. The lawyers who won this case have already said they're planning to fight more of these appointments in other states. And in the long term, this ruling could force Trump to actually use the Senate confirmation process the way it's supposed to be used. He might have to accept that he can't just put anyone he wants in these jobs without oversight. Democrats are going to use this ruling aggressively heading into the midterms. They're going to say, this proves Trump thinks he's above the law. They're going to say Republicans in Congress are complicit for not doing oversight. They're going to tie this to every other controversy swirling around the administration. And honestly, it's a pretty effective argument when you have federal courts ruling that the president violated the law in how he made appointments. That's not spin. That's not partisan talking points. That's what the court actually said. Republicans are going to have to figure out how to respond, and so far they don't seem to have a great answer. Here's the bottom line. This ruling matters because it shows that the courts are still functioning as a check on executive power. Trump has been pushing the boundaries of what a president can do since he took office again. He's been testing which rules he can break and which ones will actually be enforced. And in this case, the court said, this rule matters, and you broke it, and there are consequences. That's how democracy is supposed to work. That's how the separation of powers is supposed to function. One branch tries to overreach and another branch pushes back. It's messy, it's slow, it creates uncertainty, but it's better than the alternative where the president can do whatever he wants with no accountability at all. The question now is whether this ruling is the beginning of something bigger or just a speed bump that Trump will eventually get around. History suggests he'll keep pushing. He'll find other ways to get his loyalists into position. He'll appeal unfavorable rulings and hope the Supreme Court bails him out. But at least for today, the courts have drawn a line. At least for today, someone has said, no, you can't do that. And in this political environment, that counts for something. Keep watching this story because it's going to develop quickly. More challenges are coming, more rulings are on the way, and the fate of dozens of criminal cases hangs in the balance while everyone figures out what happens next. This is what accountability looks like. Messy and complicated and fought out one case at a time, but it's happening. And that should matter to everyone who cares about the rule of law. All right, that's it for today. Make sure you're subscribed because the DOJ drama is far from over. And trust me, you're going to want to see what happens next.